right, good afternoon. All right, Sean here again, and I am very pleased today to be talking to Michael Clemens. Michael Clemens was in the 82nd Airborne when I was, and if I remember correctly, you were my first sergeant back with Alpha 117 Cav, or if not, at least you came over very shortly after that.
Yep. So I was there. Uh, so I was there before 573. So I
Mhm.
was the first sergeant of Alpha 117 prior to the whole modularization of the Army and the standing up the CAV squadrons in the brigade combat teams.
What was that process like? I remember when I got in, it was a very difficult transition for certain people. I know there was a lot of uncertainty at the time, but it's also an exciting time.
So yeah, if I back up a little bit, I'll
Hmm.
kind of give you sort of the bigger picture. So
Hmm.
I've been in the 82nd previously, and my job just before being the first sergeant of Alpha Troop 117 Cav, which became Charlie 73rd, which became
Hmm.
sort of split Alpha and Bravo 573, was I was the 19 Delta 19 Zulu branch manager at
Hmm.
Army Human Resources Command. Um,
Hmm.
Prior to that, I'd been a platoon sergeant in an airborne unit. Prior to that, I'd been a sergeant and a staff sergeant in an airborne
Hmm.
unit. So for the majority of my career, even though I was a 19 series soldier, you know, I spent 31 years in the Army total, but about 15, 16 of that was jumping out of airplanes. So,
Hmm.
I was there. And while I was at Human Resources Command, one of the projects I worked on uh, for assigning soldiers, assignments in and out of the Army in different units was the Army was going to go to uh, a modular brigade combat team structure, and they were going to
Hmm.
put cav squadrons in every brigade, and they were going to lead on the infantry side with the 101st and some 10th Mountain, and then the 82nd. So I was at Human Resources Command, and the plan was to take all the 19 Deltas out of the 82nd, PCS them out onto other things, and then
Hmm.
like a year later, start over with brand new people.
Hmm.
So I, sort of took it upon myself to first convince my bosses at Human Resources Command and then the Army G1, and then coordinated with the 82nd leadership and their G1 to get them all to buy off on, hey, if we just left the set of 19 Deltas in Alpha Troop 117 Cav there, they already have that set of skills that you're going to be looking for to start building cavalry squadrons with anyways. And
Hmm.
so once I got that approved, um, I managed to put myself on assignment to come be the first sergeant of Alpha Troop 117
Hmm.
Cav. And then, for better or worse, got to pick all my friends and et cetera,
Hmm. Hmm.
Cobb, Matheny, Willie Lilly,
Hmm.
all a bunch of people to come be an Alpha Troop 117 Cav with me and set the stage for, 2 years of assignments that I was able to sort of set in motion to get staff sergeants, sergeant first classes. I did a whole set of IET spreads that laid out the
Hmm.
number of privates that would come out of Fort Knox to Airborne School to Fort
Hmm.
Bragg over another, an 18-month period, et cetera, to sort of at least, get both people I knew and trusted and wanted to work with again, and
Hmm.
make sure that those, 573, but all the CAV squadrons in the 82nd had the right people and enough people, at least from the 19 Delta side.
Yeah, that
And
was a. Oh, sorry, don't want to step
no,
on
go
you.
ahead.
Oh no, I just for me coming in then was a really interesting time to enter the cavalry world. Because when I went through airborne school, no one knew why a 19th Delta was coming, especially with orders to the 82nd. I caught a lot of heat from black hats and cadre just going, why is armor going to the 82nd?
Yeah. But previously, like I know you talked with Ray Edgar,
Mm-hmm.
we had an armor battalion, and then the Cav troop had always been
Mm-hmm.
a steady part of the 82nd since at least the 60s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found it really interesting when I was in. We had 19 kilo tankers. For those that don't know, briefly, there was a program where the XM8 gun system was possibly going to be adopted for support in the 82nd. And so I'm not sure if you knew anything on the 19 kilo side of that or not, but
So what we had done is the Army had wanted to give a one platoon of those MGSs, mobile gun
mm-hmm.
systems, to the 82nd to provide direct fire support to the infantry brigade combat teams, and the armor school, armor center had gone all in and sent handpicked a platoon size element of 19 kilos, sent them through
Mm-hmm.
airborne school and got them to Fort Bragg, and got them into Alpha Troop 117
Mm-hmm.
about the same time I was showing up. Uh, so the 2000, late 2004 time period, mid 2004 time period, and then the Army backed out of the whole M8 program, and so I had just a whole platoon of 19 kilos, to, like extra guys to do stuff with.
I always thought it was funny because when people talked about like airborne qualified tankers that had been on status, people were like, "You're full of stuff," and I'm like, "No, it's true." Um, so shortly after that transition, they start standing units up. 573 comes into being. It's still provisional unit. Everything's getting put together. What did that look like for you on the command side? How did those decisions start to play out, and what was kind of the vision there?
So what we started to do from sort of the beginning is work um, with Third Brigade and Aviation Brigade initially, and start to figure out how we would best man essentially two cav squadrons, so 573 and 173. And so how we would, because we only had a limited number of 19 deltas to work with, is how we would starting with 573, make sure that we filled 573 appropriately, but also left enough quality soldiers to go to 173, at least from the 19 Delta side. And then, as I think, I don't know if you had talked about in one of your previous podcasts or whatever, but augment those with 11 Bravos to round it out as until more 19 Deltas could fill in and stuff like that. But it was conscious decisions made largely with sergeants majors and first sergeants how to man those organizations for optimum capability and to ensure some sort of equity. And it wasn't like all the cool guys went to one unit, though it might have seemed like that. And the next unit got the cast-offs.
Was the original intent eventually to fill all the troops in the squadron with 19 deltas, or was it always intended to be a mix, even after moving forward with between 11 Bravos and 19 deltas?
Well, I think up front we knew it had to be a mix because it was not going to be a 19 delta. It was going to take multiple years to get enough 19 deltas to fill. When you start to about 573 to 173 to 373 and then to 473, it was going to be a 2-year process to get enough 19 deltas on the ground to fill all those squadrons. So from the beginning, we knew there was going to be a mix of 11 Bravos, at least until other soldiers started arriving on post and what have you.
I think that turned out really well too, because as we saw when we got into Iraq, having that diverse set of skills and cross training between the two different, MOSs, it seemed to work out really well. Everyone was very flexible and adaptable. Okay, so moving forward a little bit, when did you all get notice that the 82nd Third Brigade was going to deploy to Iraq, and how did that change? How did that just change decision making, if it did?
So I think we always knew that we were going to deploy, that once 573 got stood up, we would deploy. And that Third Brigade had sort of been out of the rotation for a little while because, after the initial invasion, the 82nd had kind of focused on Afghanistan. And so Third Brigade had kind of been out of the rotation because the First Brigade, the 504, had done a bunch of election support in Afghanistan, some stuff like that. But, Third Brigade was sort of the next one in the chute. The next time there was going to be a brigade-sized deployment, it was going to be the Third Brigade. So I think everything was geared towards that anyways. And then, summer, probably spring of 06, I think we, got our actual, like, hey, this is what's going to happen and get ready to go kind of thing.
Where did you go? I remember after Charlie 73rd, when everyone finally started filtering out to 573 and the different troops, where did you end up going to in 573?
So I was the Bravo Troop First Sergeant.
Okay. And oh God, I'm forgetting the CO's name at the moment. Who's the officer, the captain?
So we started with Captain Kennery, now Brigadier General Kennery, and then Steve Dobbins.
Okay. Yeah. What was it like serving under them? They were both very skilled men, and they brought really diverse skill sets to the squadron.
So it was actually great. Because I had been a first sergeant for such a long time, I had 4 company commanders or troop commanders, depending on how you look at things. And I will say that they got better each time. And certainly, now General Kennery and Steve Dobbins were, the apex of that. I mean, just solid guys, knew what they were doing, had experience, and listened to their non-commissioned officers, and made us part of the process.
Yeah, and it really paid off too. I remember Bravo Troop, when we got overseas, took on very heavy loads, did a lot of raids, a lot of planned assaults, door to door, intelligence gathering. everything that a scout should do and more. And it seemed to work, almost flawlessly most of the time.
Yeah, I don't know if it was flawless, but
Yeah,
we
yeah.
made it work one way or the other.
It was bumpy, but we made it through, right? Yeah.
Right.
Sorry, I don't have anything planned out, so I was,
Oh, you're good.
just rapping with you. But yeah, we've been talking a lot about just leadership lessons learned, and also when I was talking to Ray Edgar, he was talking about lessons learned from those that were subordinate to him as well. Do you have any comments on that process? Things you learned from other people your ranks, or was there any kind of process up and down the chain about just learning leadership and influence and how all that went?
Well, certainly it all makes an impact on you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've been on deployments before that one, and I went on, 3 deployments after, the
Mm-hmm.
573, the famous 573 deployment.
Mm-hmm.
But, certainly learned uh, from everybody along the way. And I'm telling you that I had some really good platoon sergeants that I learned a lot
Mm-hmm.
from, like Pete Johnson, Lilly, Hitchrick. I mean, just guys that were, really good at what they did. Had some fabulous staff sergeants that, certainly in given a little bit of freedom to execute their mission, did some
Mm-hmm.
amazing things, and taught me a lot, and stuff that I used there in theater, during that deployment, and certainly carried forward with me, and as I became a battalion sergeant major, squadron sergeant major, and shaped
Mm-hmm.
for a deployment to Afghanistan and at the brigade and above, where yeah, just the lessons that 573 provided in terms of leadership from the battalion, leadership at the field grade major level, the XO and the 3, the troop commanders, and the other platoon leaders, platoon sergeants, and other non-commissioned officers, almost across the board, certainly set a stage and a standard that
Mm-hmm.
you carry forward with everything else you do. In my case, for another 15 years in the Army or whatever it turned out to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you coming from the Army branch manager, that's the personnel management side of things. Really seem to play a very key role. Sorry if that sounds obvious, but being able to choose who you want to go where, find out what people are capable of, put them through the testing process, and where everything fits well. That seemed to work really well in 573. Did you feel like you had a lot of choice after the unit started to be put together? After Charlie 73rd and all that, did you still have freedom to pick and choose, move people around, and was there any kind of process in finding what skills an individual might have and where they best fit?
So there was some movement, and I think there
Mm-hmm.
was plenty of opportunity as the first sergeants, especially platoon leaders like the medics and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. Obviously, Sergeant Major Edgar, Colonel Pappas, etc., where we saw people that turned out to be innately good at things, or for their own
Mm-hmm.
professional development, or just some cases better fits where people might move from Bravo Troop to Alpha Troop or over to HHT or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it was, and you know just be able to occupy that niche that allowed them to be and allowed the unit to be more successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, are there any specific lessons that maybe came up during the deployment that ended up really aiding you as your career progressed and you did other deployments with different units?
I think in a lot of ways, just some of the flexibility
Mm-hmm.
that again, just from my Bravo Troop sort of experience side, is a lot of the flexibility we had in order to plan and execute things. Obviously, we were given missions by our battalion headquarters and our squadron headquarters, and outlined by the 3 shop how things needed to be done and what the end state we were looking for was. But then we really had a lot of freedom, and things I learned. What Steve Dobbins was really good at was planning and writing an order, and rehearsing, and things that I took forward. A year later in Afghanistan, a lot of those, especially like rehearsal lessons, where you get people on the ground, you put them on a as close as you can to a life-size terrain board, and you have them move things, and you talk about angles and movements and things like that. And probably one of the strongest lessons would be just the amount of rehearsals that you should do and how successful that can make you.
Sorry, I'm going off and on with the mute, and I'm making sure you can still hear me, right?
Yep, I can still hear you.
Okay, great.
I'm in
I've got
training someplace.
yeah. uh, I was gonna say to that. I definitely noticed when we finally got into real combat situations or just needed flexibility, that training really did pay off. The walkthroughs before, we do a lot of training before specific mission. You know, if we are going on a raid, we make mock houses that would look like what intelligence told us. And just being a soldier in the middle of that, I felt that I knew instinctively what we needed to do when we were on the ground in that moment. Um, I, I tell a lot of stories about me just because I know my experience that I've lived it. But again, when we got in my first real close range firefight, everything that happened in that happened from autonomous systems. All the training had kicked in, and I felt like my conscious brain just went for a ride while my body did everything else. And
Right.
I saw that up and down, at a unit level, at a squad level, at a section level, where sections would maneuver without even needing to be told what to do. Just at every level, that focus on training and the intensity of it really, really paid off when we got overseas.
No, 100%. And, the ability of, individual teams and squads, platoons to, move, control fires, employ mortars, all those things that we brought to bear just from our own assets, but also incorporate, the aviation that we had on hand and, during, Turkey, the two Turkeys,
Mm-hmm.
Bradley platoons and all
Mm-hmm.
this other stuff. And, just as a personal sort of aside, uh, I remember, I think it was Turkey 2. I'm the first sergeant. I'm,
Mm-hmm.
generally supposed to be behind people, but I'm over on the scene between Bravo Troop and Alpha Troop.
Mm-hmm.
And, I make, direct fire contact. And so my own vehicle is firing. So I'm controlling my own direct fires. I'm on the
Mm-hmm.
radio talking to, an artillery unit from 1st Cav who's supporting
Mm-hmm.
us controlling indirect fires. I'm on my other net with, two two helicopters that are coming in from another direction at altitude, and
Mm-hmm.
then and I have a Bradley platoon slightly to my right
Mm-hmm.
doing its thing, and I'm like, this is like the apex of everything that
Mm-hmm.
everything the Army ever taught me to do right here. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just being a part of that on my side was it was fun. Just a quick anecdote was when we were at Turkey and we were calling in fires and doing different adjust fires, and the two of the FO officers, Terzon and Clopton, they were they were upstairs with the equipment, just getting to play with it. And they looked like school children, going, "God, we actually get to play with this equipment for real. Like I never thought we were going to use this for real." And it was a surreal seeing how again how it all came together in different ways, how each person was able to work, and it all came down to the organizational success and planning before we ever left the states.
yeah, and certainly we benefited, organizationally we benefited from that time to to bring the two seemingly disparate units together to
Mm-hmm.
grow. We went to Katrina helped,
Mm-hmm.
JOTC helped. We were able to do obviously a lot of live fire and field
Mm-hmm.
training. So we definitely had a solid plan, well executed, and certainly came together as a unit. And by the
Mm-hmm.
time we got to Kuwait and we were going through the training in Kuwait, I think we were so far ahead of what the
Mm-hmm.
the mandatory training people had set for us in Kuwait that we just blew right through all that stuff.
Yeah, and I always would see I always see your guys out there between the barracks doing some kind of like hip pocket training if there's nothing going on. I remember someone got plywood and built a shoot house, like a mock shoot house,
Right.
between the barracks just to run through different squads, and they go at it all day. And every moment when when there was downtime during the day, there would be something mission oriented going for training. And it seemed like I got a lot of work then. Privates always would want to go hang out in the barracks and play video games, but that when you finally got down to brass tacks, it really mattered. And again, it was just leaders pushing, pushing, pushing.
Yeah. 100%. I think
So, how did your experiences in the military help you now that you've transitioned into the private sector?
so. Interestingly enough, so I retired from the Army. I said I did about 31 years in the Army.
Mm.
Then I immediately transitioned into working for the Army as a civilian
Mm-hmm.
uh, for about 5 years ish, and then just recently, have started working for an actual civilian company.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but my experience in sort of the civilian world is that they're kind of very few of the people I work with, there's a handful, have any like meaningful military experience. There's a
Mm-hmm.
handful of people that were in the Army or the Marines or whatever, a couple of people like myself that are retirees, but most of them have spent their whole life working, as civilians in
Mm-hmm.
civilian occupations. And sometimes they're almost starved, for
Mm-hmm.
the type of leadership that people from
Mm-hmm.
the Army bring, and our willingness to both, sort of get our hands dirty, speak truth to power kind of stuff. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, probably doesn't hurt, not to toot my own horn, but I've already been
Mm-hmm.
somebody, so I'm not really worried about it. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
just, I'll, I'll say I'll say what I mean, and I'll say what I
Mm-hmm.
think needs to be said, and then I'll move on to the next thing. And I think a lot of people in the civilian world find that very refreshing.
I've noticed that as well in the own business that I work with. And we were talking about it, I forget who exactly I was talking with it, but the confidence that comes from going through something like that, and also having that training, having that leadership, and having that kind of camaraderie. I've never really had to worry about proving myself to anyone else because I already know who myself is. And when you transition to the work world, that it matters. Other people are attracted to that, and it really goes a long way to whatever you decide to lead in.
Right. No, I agree 100%. And, interestingly enough, during my whole time in the Army, but even in the civilian world, as I still run into people and, talk to people, the whole 573 is just, it's
Mm.
recognized. Even
Mm-hmm.
out amongst, predominantly now civilians, we're like, oh, you were in that 573. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, I've it comes up in the strangest places too. And
right.
I've loved as everyone's careers have gone on. I was telling Tim Matheny a story about how I ran into a really young 11 Bravo at the airport, and he'd just come out of Benning, and I went up and I was talking to him because he's flying in uniform, of course. That's what privates do. That's how you get first class. I know, but I start talking to him and it's like, hey, this guy, I'm showing him pictures on the phone. I'm like, do you ever seen that picture before? He's like, yeah. I was on the wall at Benning. I'm like, yeah, I was his driver. Like, and it was because he was a sergeant major in charge of Fort Benning at the time. And
Hmm.
so it was so great seeing how everyone that went through that process, not everyone, but I mean, a lot of people have come out and been leaders in different fields, are still in the military, just guiding from every level. It's just really refreshing to see that. Yeah.
Right. Now, it's definitely a unit that is, punched above its weight,
Mm-hmm.
swung hard, and, has certainly made an impact across the Army and the number of people that we have put into some very, challenging upper echelon leadership positions.
Mm-hmm. What I've been kind of asking everyone too. Uh, what is what's a memory that you always think about when you're with 573? Something that makes you smile, or something that makes you really mad. One of those one of those little stories that don't get told a lot.
So I don't know if it makes me smile or
Mm-hmm.
makes me mad either. Something, um, what we had air assaulted in someplace. Uh, I don't remember it was one of those shaping operations.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of Baqubah. Uh, Bravo and Charlie had air assaulted in. Alpha was moving by ground,
Mm-hmm.
and we started clearing a village, and we gathered some intelligence, and that led us
Mm-hmm.
into air assaulting someplace else, and that
Mm-hmm.
led us to air assaulting someplace else.
Mm-hmm.
It was the same mission where Swagger and his guys ended up getting
Yeah.
killed, but
Mm-hmm.
it was just we were clearing the palm groves and little villages, and it was just day after day after day of
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and it rationing water. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the whole works. And, probably, just in terms of, something I look back on, I guess, with a mixture of smile and pride and, what the fuck, was just, that we got through that. And,
Mm-hmm.
not only got through it, we, really excelled and,
Mm-hmm.
set conditions for stuff that was to come later.
Yeah, I think back on that mission especially, but I just look at my body now and I'm like, how the hell did we do that? Like, yeah. And I loved hearing. I kept in contact with some of the units that were in the area. I think the Bravo troop patrol bases end up shutting down. The Alpha patrol base stayed open and was used for the follow-on unit. But it was interesting talking with people. So I worked a talk in Baghdad on my second tour, and used the used the resources there to keep in touch with whoever was in our old AO. And it was nice hearing their responses, because they kept telling me, "Hey, things are quiet here. Like, it's there's nothing going on. We don't have a lot of contact. There's nothing to worry about." And it was just great knowing that all the effort that we put in, it did pay off. Maybe
Right.
not forever, but it made a lasting impression.
And sometimes it's hard. One of the things I used to talk to soldiers about, as a first sergeant, as a sergeant major, et
Mm-hmm.
cetera, is you know try to look at it. You're immersed in the day to day, and it's hard to see.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes try to pull back and think about
Mm-hmm.
the first 2 or 3 weeks we were here, and now we've been here for 9 or 10 months, and try to look at the differences. And
Mm-hmm.
you could see where you could see where you made a difference. You
Mm-hmm.
could there's kids outside playing. There's just people who have stores open and they're selling
Mm-hmm.
things or whatever it is. And it may or may not have lasted forever, but for that brief time while you were involved, you have made a difference in people's lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that not seeing the impact immediately, that's been a really important part of um, just kind of the mental health that comes out of military service. One of the interesting things, I'm not sure if you've seen it, I haven't mentioned it a lot in the group yet, but I contacted General retired David Petraeus to see if he would actually do an interview about 573. And
Mm-hmm.
he responded to me within like 4 hours of the message being sent, and he said, absolutely, I remember 573, and I wrote your award, just saying, yeah, let's talk about it. And I corresponded with him a little bit on it, and it was always immediate responses. So who am I? I'm a nobody. He was head of the
Yeah.
CIA at one point, but he remembers the impact. Nearly 20 years later, and that to me is incredibly validating.
Right. No,
Mm-hmm.
I agree. And I think across the Army we made an impact. You
Mm-hmm.
know, across the Army in the military,
Mm-hmm.
573 made an outsized impact. In operations both in Iraq and in how to conduct operations.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of what theater you find yourself in.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, in your experience, did you see, because I know being the first airborne RISTA, there wasn't really a doctrine, it was being written. Did you see how what was being written, what was decided, and how all the kind of flexing, what came out of that from 573, and how it was applied to the rest of the Army, like organizationally?
So I don't think that necessarily. So there was a doctrine, and all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff's going away now because the
Mm-hmm.
cavalry squadrons, at least in infantry and striker brigades, are going away. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the reason why we're doing some of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I I don't know that there was an official. I'm sure there was an official doctrine
Mm-hmm.
like how to fight Arista, how to fight an airborne cavalry
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
squadron, or a light cavalry squadron, or whatever you want to
Mm-hmm.
call it. But I think the necessity of the fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan over
Mm-hmm.
the majority of the lives of those units necessitated sort of ad hoc and or
Mm-hmm.
solutions that worked for where you were at the time that aren't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily applicable to other Cav squadrons or to even 2 years later in the life of that Cav
Mm-hmm.
squadron. So I don't know if 573 did anything that directly impacted how the armor school wrote doctrine or anything,
Mm-hmm.
but certainly provided lessons learned, things like that for other units operating in that same area or operating in similar unit areas,
Mm-hmm.
or things that I took with me, across the street to Fourth Brigade and 473 Cav,
Mm-hmm.
for how at least as a start point, for what we would do in Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm. I do know on the academic side, at least, it did make a big impact. My my degrees, which I can't sell, I studied a lot of counterterrorism for about 10 years afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
I have a 4-year degree in international conflict studies, and I read a lot of scholarly paperwork that was produced by officers in 573, and it did go out into um, the world that talks about counterterrorism, how to fight extremism, how to actually bring battlefield elements into that fight, just the flexibility and all the other lessons learned. So it very much did filter through and make an impact in a lot of different levels that I don't think we even see fully today.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
See, we're running a little bit low on time. I wanted to ask, I'm not sure if you're comfortable talking about it or not, but have you had any problems kind of readjusting, or kind of, a lot of us came back with a lot of negative emotions. I Unfortunately, a lot of people have gotten into alcoholism, or there's been, a lot of darkness has followed some people. I'm not sure if you've experienced any of that in your life, and would you have any advice or words, on people that are maybe struggling still with things like that?
So the number one thing is find
Mm-hmm.
somebody to talk to. Don't be afraid to get help. So I
Mm-hmm.
think while I was in the Army, um, I don't think I thought about it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I continued to train to deploy, deploy, train to deploy,
Mm-hmm.
deploy, et cetera. Or, I was the armor school sergeant major, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I had something to do, something to focus on. And I don't think I allowed it to bother me, or I didn't,
Mm-hmm.
I had something to do that didn't dwell on, some
Mm-hmm.
of my experiences. When I got out of the Army, that all changed.
Mm-hmm.
And, when, when the pace was slower and,
Mm-hmm.
I had, more time to sit around and I guess, think deep thoughts and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, certainly find myself, questioning things, thinking about things, probably overthinking things, and did have to seek help.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I know, Ray and some other people, do a lot of stuff with the Travis Mills stuff, who was actually
Mm-hmm.
one of my soldiers over in 473. Um, but I hadn't had the chance to go do that, but I've actually thought about it, but I did have to
Mm-hmm.
seek help. I did have to find somebody to talk to, and in a way to, better ways to express myself that weren't, potentially
Mm-hmm.
destructive.
No, thank you for talking about that. I've found that there's such a stigma with certain people, especially with men's mental health in general, but especially coming out of the military and the wars and things, that it's sometimes almost like we need permission to be able to look after ourselves. That doing so isn't a sign of weakness. Healing isn't necessarily weakness. It's like you would maintain your weapons. You maintain your body. You have to maintain your mind and your emotions as well.
Right. So I kind of looked at it like there's a French, or I'm sorry, an Italian philosopher. Um, I can't think of his name now. Now that I started talking about it, but he said, a man should be three things: a
Mm,
warrior, a scholar, and an artist. Uh,
mm-hmm,
I've been a warrior.
mm-hmm,
I have a master's degree, so I've been a scholar. I continue to try to learn and do scholarly things. Uh, but lately, since I've been out of the Army, I also try to find that art side of me,
mm-hmm,
whether it's writing, whether it's trying to draw or paint, or
mm-hmm,
do those things that get you outside of your box and get you outside of your head and find a
mm-hmm.
way to express other things.
Yeah, I remember reading, the Japanese samurai would practice art as a part of their martial arts. It
Mm-hmm.
was it was a discipline for them as much as anything else, and for good reasons. It does open your mind in different ways and make you see the world in different ways. My own photography, I fall off the edge of the cliff with that. I love it because it makes me see the world in different ways and see different relationships. And I honestly think that is good for people who are still in the military too, because again, we saw with our fight, um, sometimes you have to look outside the box to find new ways to accomplish the mission.
Right. And you only
Uh,
have to please yourself. There's,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
you
uh,
only got,
we're, we've got a couple minutes left, and I was just going to say, is there anything that you wanted to specifically talk about or add to?
if I had a closing thought, it would be just,
Mm,
looking back on it. Uh, like I said, I've been on other deployments. I've been in really good
mm,
units, uh, both deployed and, in the States. But there's, the group of people in 573 at just that, that unique moment in time, many of which I still talk to, in one
mm,
form or another today, you know, has very much impacted my life. And I
mm.
hope that, potentially I've provided some help or impact on their lives as well.
I'm sure you have in ways that you don't even know. I've been enjoying these interviews so much because so many stories and the people that have influenced them are coming out now. And it feels like people are they're at a time period where they really want to communicate and tell other people just what it means. I know I have that problem when people were above me. I could never express how much I'd learned from them. I had a problem with sharing gratitude up at the time
Mhm.
because of the hierarchy. And now that that's gone, I want to let everyone know how much they've influenced me. And on you influenced me a lot. Coming in, you were my first sergeant, so that was a big deal for me. Helped set the standard for my short military career, but yeah, taught me what was right was from the beginning. So
Oh, good. Glad I could help.
yeah. Well, I'm still here, and I don't know how. That was a big target, but I guess extra large sappy plates. But no. Oh, shoot, I want to give you as much time as possible, and we got like 3 minutes. Um, I'll tell you what was one of the dumbest things you saw one of your Joes do?
Oh, dumbest things I saw Joe do. That's a
This
long
might be a
list.
difficult question.
um, yeah, so probably Pearson trying to steal a Humvee that had the lock thing around it, so he's making like little turns.
Yes,
That was a good one. That was a
I
classic.
I have to say that was my fault. I take responsibility. We went out to drink with the British paratroopers.
Right. Yeah.
Never challenged the British to a drinking contest. We were drinking Jaeger bombs, and that's how that ended up. Yeah, I remember watching him driving by, and it was Glenn Bennett. Glenn Bennett was
Oh
staff duty,
yeah.
driving by in a minivan, and he points at us and he screams. He goes, "Get the f in your barracks right now!" Because it was Dominic Ferraro and I were trying to get Pearson out of the thing, and we're like, "Nope, we don't have enough rank to lose." Jumped in the window, and then shortly after, that was a special forces Humvee, and almost caused an international incident. But I miss that guy. He was good people.
Yeah, that's one of the ones that stand out.
Mm-hmm. Oh, great. Well, thank you for talking with me today. And
Yeah,
um,
thanks for having me. I
I'm
appreciate
not
it.
sure. Are you going to make it to the ceremony?
I will be. I'll be down there next
Perfect.
week.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll see you in a week then.
All right, sounds good.
All right. Thank you.